How's it going, everyone? This is Tom. Today we're going to be talking iPhone 6, the 6th iteration of the iPhone. Or is it actually the 9th iteration of the iPhone, Apple? Now that the release date for the iPhone 6 is getting closer and closer, let's run down some of the rumours, some of the leaks for the newest generation iPhone, and see what surprises Apple have in store for us with the iPhone 6. So starting off with the most obvious thing here, it's kind of the thing which most people are excited about, the size, the form factor of the iPhone 6. It's very likely that we'll be seeing a 4.7-inch version of the iPhone 6. There may also be kind of a 5.5-inch version as well. However, personally, I would say that Apple will kind of stick with one version of their phone, a 4.7-inch version. It's quite a big jump from a 4-inch phone like the iPhone 5S to go straight to a 4.7-inch version. So going to include kind of a 4.7-inch version and then a 5.5-inch version as well, I personally don't see that happening. It might happen, but just in my eyes, I don't really see it as that realistic. The resolution of this display may come in at 960 by 1704 pixels, and that'll give the iPhone 6 a pixel density of 416 pixels per inch. That's a fantastic resolution for a display. It will definitely keep it in contention with things like the HTC One M8, a 1080p resolution, and the Samsung Galaxy S5. Obviously, with that size increase, we will be seeing a new design on the iPhone 6 as well. We've already seen design changes in the iPod Touch line. The iPod Touch 5th generation is probably what will resemble the iPhone 6 mostly. If you have one of those around, it will probably end up looking like a larger version of that. The iPad line is also a good representation. We have the iPad Air now coming in. They basically will make it the iPhone 6 thinner and kind of round off the edges, make it a more premium feeling design. Personally, I'm not an enormous fan of kind of the sharp edges on the iPhone 5S, so I'm very, very excited to see this change. And hey, I've always used iOS on a 4-inch screen, and personally, I just can't deal with it anymore. If this 4.7-inch screen goes ahead, I will be first in line to buy one. Whilst we're talking about the design, we have to talk a little bit about the display. Now, the display on the iPhone 6 may well be made out of sapphire glass. Now, Apple already uses sapphire glass in their iPhones. For example, on the iPhone 5S, it has it over the Touch ID sensor, and also on the camera sensor on the back. It's basically to stop scratches. It makes it kind of extra resistant from scratches and scuffs and things like that. Obviously, if you have a fingerprint scanner on your phone, you don't want to get it scratched so you can't read your fingerprint anymore. However, on the iPhone 6, it may be likely that Apple will stick in sapphire glass in their entire display. That will mean you're going to get scratch resistant display all over. It's very, very unlikely you actually get a scratch on the front of your phone, and hopefully it will protect from drops as well. If this goes ahead, I'm very excited. It will definitely be a nice feature for Apple to put in. I know that there's nothing worse for me personally when one of the screens gets scratched on one of my phones, so it's a big deal. Again, talking about the design of the iPhone 6, it's very likely that Apple will move the power button of their phone onto the side of the handset. We see this a lot in Android phones. Android phones have been getting progressively bigger over the years, and we've seen a move from the power button, the lock switch, being on the top of Android phones to the side. It makes it easier for people with smaller hands to lock and unlock their phones, and even people with bigger hands. It's easier to unlock and unlock your phone if your power switch is right next to your thumb. I definitely see this making sense. If Apple are going with a 4.7-inch version, you don't want complaints from people with smaller hands not being able to unlock their phone as easily. As always with the iPhone, we will be seeing a new version of iOS, most likely iOS 8, and this of course will include lots of new functionality, things like Health Book, which is Apple's new health suite. I don't see iOS being majorly revamped in iOS 8. Generally, the way it works is that every few years we will get a vast overhaul of iOS. iOS 5 was a big change from iOS 4. iOS 7 was a huge change from iOS 6. However, changes like iOS 6 were actually smaller. So it's likely that we'll be seeing extra additional functionality, no vast design changes in iOS 8. We will be seeing iOS 8 on the iPhone 6. And along with iOS 8, it's very likely we will be seeing hardware upgrades to actually speed up the iPhone. So we may well see a quad-core processor go into the iPhone 6. It just depends on whether Apple kind of considers it necessary. Apple tend to not jump into the specification race, which personally I really enjoy from them. They tend to keep things simple and just keep what works. The iPhone 5S is one of the quickest phones on the market because Apple's software optimization is incredibly good for the hardware that they use. You don't need a quad-core phone to run iOS. As we've seen in the past, all dual-core phones run iOS 7 perfectly fine. So whether or not they decide to stick in a quad-core processor into the iPhone 6, it's not really necessary. We'll probably see a steady RAM amount as well. Coming from the iPhone 5S, it's very likely we'll be seeing 1GB of RAM in the iPhone 6. They may bump it slightly, it's just dependent on whether they feel necessary. Because as I said, iOS 7 already runs incredibly, blisteringly quick on the iPhone 5S. Little to no lag whenever you use it. Next up we have the camera. The camera on the iPhone 6 is likely to be one of the best cameras on the market. The camera is always an incredibly strong point for Apple's phones. The iPhone 5S is one of the best cameras you can get in a phone right now. Obviously you have devices like the Nokia Lumia 1020 which have just unbelievable cameras, and the Samsung Galaxy S5 as well. Samsung always do an excellent job with cameras on their phones, but Apple is always up there. They're always kind of within the top 3, top 5 cameras on smartphones, and I don't expect the iPhone 6 to be any different. It's very likely that we'll see an 8-megapixel camera again in the iPhone 6. Either that or they'll bump it slightly, maybe to a 13-megapixel shooter. I don't see them jumping up to 16 megapixels like the Samsung Galaxy S5 is. Apple, as I said, don't tend to jump into specification races. They will do what works for them. They will produce a very good camera, and you can rest assured that the iPhone 6 will be one of the best cameras on the market in a smartphone. As for a release date with the iPhone 6, we will probably be seeing a release in either late August, around the 30th of August, or early September. I believe last year it was around the kind of 10th of September, that sort of date. In case you haven't been able to tell, I'm extremely excited for this iPhone release. I do really enjoy using iOS. However, for now, I'm using the Nexus 5 as my daily driver. It's just my favorite phone. However, I'm just loving the screen size. I can't deal with a smaller screen anymore. I've been using iOS on a 4-inch screen for probably the past 2 years, and it's just getting a bit boring, a bit dull. I'm incredibly excited to see what it's like on a 4.7-inch form factor. If you put this change in Apple, I will be first in the line. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have and you're excited for the release of the iPhone 6, go ahead and drop this video a like. If you'd like to see more content on it, go ahead and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.